Well, good afternoon. Please, as we'll let people just join, but perhaps you could just pop in and say who you are in the Q&A. This could be a short webinar.
Could be.
Yeah. Men Bahadur. Good afternoon, Men Bahadur Garong. How you doing? So we've got one loyal soldier here. Eamon's in. Good afternoon, Eamon. Ray Ramsey, good afternoon. Welcome. John Swanson, being a good military guy, was here 5 minutes early.
Habits don't die.
No, we've all lost that skill now, I think.
Yeah, the number of people apologising for being late for Teams calls.
Yeah. I'm going to get started and let people join. As I said, John, quite a number of these guys do watch these afterwards, and we'll store this for posterity. And
sure.
I know on our YouTube channel they are quite well researched, quite well looked at. This is the next in our series, fourth in our immediate series of webinars. I hope those of you that joined last week to do the Mandiant FireEye exercise found that useful. Next week we are turning our attention more towards the public sector with a guy called Ross Wardle and his team from Arcanum Cyber. They've got a lot of public sector contracts, and so for those of you who are interested in at least thinking about going back into defence or going back into the public sector, that should be a valuable session. John is an old friend of Salute My Job on this programme. When we were running the live courses at Corsham, he came to visit, and who were imprisoned in that classroom found it a very useful session. So please, as John's got a few introductory slides to talk about himself and Fujitsu, but hopefully as the drill is now clear, just pop your questions into the Q&A and we will answer those as we go along. So without further ado, on your behalf, can I thank you, John, very much for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Right, thank you. Let me try and share my desktop. Can you see my screen?
Not yet. Yeah.
Excellent. Right, yeah, so quick introduction on me before I go into this slide. So yeah, I'm John Swanson, I'm ex-RAF. I joined as an airman, spent some time as an NCO and left as an officer. I left in 2007, a long time ago now. I worked for Airbus when I first left the service for about 18 months. I then joined BT, and then I joined Fujitsu about 10 years ago now. So I've been here for 10 years. So on my current role is I have two jobs. One is that I look after our go-to-market, the cybersecurity services we actually go to market with. And the second element is I'm responsible for developing the security capabilities within our global delivery centers around the world. So primarily Poland, Russia, India, and the Philippines for security. Fujitsu itself, we're a global service integrator stroke digital transformation company. Within that, we have a security function, one of 7 sort of go-to-market areas. Security is one of those, and that means we deliver managed security services, consultancy, and also we resell some security products, but our primary focus is around managed security services and security consultancy. From a security perspective, we'll go into what Service Integrators do in a bit, but that's kind of me in a nutshell. So I think there were kind of 3 asks. I think first one was talk about the market, types of employment. Second one was to talk about certifications, and the third element was to talk about the types of roles that are available for cybersecurity professionals. And some of this I knew when I left the service, some of it I've learned since. So certainly for me, when I've briefed other service guys, it's been quite useful insight. Okay, so without any further ado, we'll talk about the cybersecurity market. So COVID has had an impact upon cybersecurity spending and spending in and around, unsurprisingly. However, the global cybersecurity market is estimated, depending who you believe, which analyst, to be about $170 billion a year. And the good news is it continues to grow. So it's always good to work in a market that's growing. So Gartner talk about an 8% growth. IDC, who are another analyst, talk about an 8% growth in this market as well. From a UK perspective, the estimated size of the cybersecurity market is about 8 billion pounds, and it's grown about 46%, as it says, since 2017. So again, it reinforces the message that cybersecurity is a growing industry to be working in. It's also a highly acquisitive market. So what we see in the industry is, as small startup companies start to flourish, they get bought out by the bigger boys. That tends to be a recurring theme within cybersecurity, and I'll reinforce that as I go through the message. As you move into industry, and it may already be common language in defense, so digital transformation is one of the most commonly used words about organizations maturing their security functions, their security capabilities, but that's only a tiny part of digital transformation. This is about evolving the way organizations do business, both with customers, their most important people, and also as they do business with their suppliers as well. So this is about radically changing the way they do business. To do that, you've got to underpin that with security, which reinforces part of the reason why security continues to be increasingly relevant as organizations adopt cloud, greater use of applications, mobility, industrial control systems and operational technology. That's becoming much more of a relevant area. An organization consuming software as a service increases to all of these platforms, whereas historically the industry was very technology product centric. It's becoming much more of a platform play. All of this evolution and digital transformation means security becomes increasingly relevant. So if you're looking to go into the cyber industry, it's a growing industry, which is always a good one to join. So in terms of employment within the UK, so the estimate is about 1,200 firms in the UK. I've got further information on those types of organisations shortly. But again, that's grown 44% since 2018. So more companies joining, tend to be smaller companies that comprise the 44%, because the larger organisations are what they are. But what we see is the larger organisations acquire some of the smaller ones. 90% of those companies, sorry, are small to medium enterprises. I've got a slide that shows that as well. And the smaller organisations turn over about 2 billion, which means the 10%, the bigger organisations, effectively take up the other 6 billion of revenue in the UK. There's about 44,000 people employed by those 1,200 firms, cybersecurity professionals within those firms. So a fairly healthy number of professionals. The one thing that doesn't include is any of the security professionals working for companies themselves. So this is very much a provider, security provider's lens on the number of people and the types of company, but pretty much every organization now that these companies serve, so when the likes of ourselves, we provide services to banks and utilities customers. Those customers themselves have security people working in their organizations. So your kind of counterpart, that those people are not counted in the 43,000. So the reality, the number's probably 60, 65,000 plus people employed in security across the UK. Okay, so moving on to types of employer. So there are, and again, these definitions are not necessarily as rigid as they could be, because there are shades of grey between the providers. So there are a number of security pure play providers, as we call them. So these are companies that only focus on the delivery of security services and managed security services. So examples of this would be the likes of SecureWorks, Mandiant or FireEye to some extent, Trustwave, eSentire, CrowdStrike, Optiv. So these types of companies focus entirely on managed security services supported by consulting. Then there's probably the biggest group, and I don't mean biggest in terms of numbers, I mean biggest in terms of employers and revenue, group of providers, the service providers and integrators. So Fujitsu would be one of those. You've then got the likes of IBM, DXC, Atos, Capgemini, the Indian outsourcers, the Wipros and TCSs. You've got the Orange cybersecurity systems, the more specialist companies that focus on sectors like BAE, CGI, Kinetic. So there's a fairly rich number of security service providers and service integrators. Telcos or telecom providers, those are their primary focuses on telecoms. So the likes of BT, Vodafone, and more globally AT&T and Verizon. So those are telecoms companies that also provide security as part of their broader portfolio. Consultancy or specialist security consultancy companies. So the likes of NCC, Ernst & Young, PwC, Context IS, who recently got bought by Accenture, Netitude, BSI, the British Standards Institute, who recently bought InfoAssure, and Fujitsu, we use a company called Stratia as an example, who are a small consulting company, but they bring specialist skills that we really value. So there's quite a rich variety of consultancy companies in the market. Technology providers I'll cover on the next slide because that is a really diverse ecosystem. And then resellers and distribution. So one of the things certainly I didn't know about when I was serving, and even for a few years when I left, there is a fairly sizable employment opportunity in companies that do technology reselling and distribution of technology. Now, it's not just about technology per se, because those resellers and distribution are trying to become more relevant. So they themselves are providing consultancy service and managed services. So reseller and distribution organizations, the likes of E92, Arrow, Exclusive, Infinigate, those types of companies are also employing security professionals to work and actually help transition the technologies that they provide into services for other providers. And the final piece I spoke about in terms of the numbers that aren't counted in the 43,000 above. So all of the security professionals that work in companies. So whether you're in financial services, manufacturing and utilities, retail, hospitality, public sector, transport, energy, all of the sectors you can think of, they're all going to have security professionals working in their organizations. So for example, all of the financial services, major financial services organizations have their own security operations centers that are fully staffed by some really, really top-end, experienced, capable people. That's just one example. We work with manufacturing and utilities customers who also have fully staffed security operations centers. So those companies will have a fairly broad spectrum of people that work in their facilities, working effectively assuring and protecting those organizations from cyber attacks.
John, can I jump in for a second? And there was a tendency for those to be outsourced, and as you said at the front, at the top of the call, you've got teams abroad. Is there a trend towards continuing those security operations centres to be set up overseas, or are we beginning to see more come back here? What's the trend, or isn't it shifting hugely?
It really is a bit of a mixed economy, if and it depends on the customer. So it's a UK public sector as an example, is tending to keep most of its security operations in the UK from a sovereignty perspective. We're not seeing a huge amount of offshoring or nearshoring, because there are three models really. There's onshore, so you need the services to be delivered and the data to be resident in country. There's a nearshore, so we talk about EU. So we've got a delivery center in Poland. Others have got EU-based delivery centers, which can provide customers. If I put my European head on, when we talk to customers in the Netherlands or France or Belgium or Spain, if they don't need their services to be in country, then they're very happy to take services from anywhere in Poland. And then there's the offshore piece where, you know, a number of our customers, including some very well-known brands, are quite happy to take services from Russia or India. So, but we are seeing a growth overall in the amount of managed security services being provided. And again, it sometimes there's a balance between needing people that understand the business and the implications of security upon the customer's business. They need to be in the customer, versus some of the security functions that you can push to a service provider, depending how you want to carve up your contract. So management of infrastructure and devices, you might want to give that to a service integrator to do, because they can do it in a more standardized and consistent way. The company security operations team may then simply take the output of that and then make it, you know, so why is that relevant to my company? And yes, there are mixed models in between.
So it's being driven largely by the client and the risk or the price that they're prepared to pay for it. Just for our listeners, I've been talking to two clients, including my old employer, IBM, who are setting up new security operations centres in the UK, one in Aberdeen. Capgemini, I think it is, has got theirs in Inverness. So these are scattered around, and so feel free, as John goes through this, to ask questions about those sorts of facilities, because they make such a good entry point to big organisations, and from there you can grow from there. So stick your questions in the Q&A, and nice to see the attendees that some people have woken up from their afternoon snooze and are joining us now. So John Swanson from Fujitsu, please crack up.
Yeah, fine. I think you raised a really good point, Andrew. Actually, one of the things we've seen in COVID is less of a dependency upon geographical limitations. So whereas historically we've got a security operations centre in Warrington, we've got one in Bracknell, we've also got pockets in Solihull to make sure that we've got coverage for various customers. And there are a number of security operations centres in and around the Warrington-Manchester area. There are a number now being established in Wales, obviously London and the M4 corridor, and as you say, Scotland. Whereas historically, we may have been a bit more inclined to worry about where some of our people were based. What we've seen, certainly during this pandemic, is that we've become more flexible in terms of our employment, and it's kind of more of a virtual SOC basis and more of virtual employment. So that may benefit service leavers as they leave, and they don't physically have to lift themselves close to London or do that slog in every day, depending where they are, for work. So that's something that we've seen change certainly since the beginning of the year. Okay, next slide. So I spoke about technology providers. You may have seen this slide in various instances. It was pushed out at the VMware conference a couple of years ago. This is the technology ecosystem that exists out there. So when I talk about the technology landscape being very diverse, there are, I think when I spoke to one of the distribution partners, he was of the opinion there's about 2,500 technology companies out there currently providing for security needs. And the reason all of these security companies exist, technology companies exist, there are a few service providers through there as well, is because security is such a diverse topic. And as I spoke about earlier, as organizations move into digital transformation, actually this number will possibly consolidate at the top end. There'll be a few bigger players that have got sizable chunks of the market, but the new entrants coming in, addressing problems that we're identifying as we evolve our organizations and the way we do business, they're going to create new technologies to meet new services and new customer demands. happened there? I presume you lost that. Let me just restart PowerPoint. All right, can you see my screen again, Andrew? Andrew, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got it now.
Great.
Thanks.
Okay. Marvelous. Yeah. So just to reinforce some of the statistics, I'm not going to go into any great detail. Top left, you can see, I think I spoke about 90% of the companies being in the small, medium or micro organizations. So the majority of security employers are relatively small in size. And if you look to the top right box, you can see the kind of size and scale of the organization. So there's a lot of small companies, less than 10 people, an awful lot. And some of those are literally a few mates that work together, stand up a company, and they go off and do some consulting. I've got quite a few ex-colleagues here, and also friends I've worked with in the industry who've set themselves up as small companies, just working now without the environment of having to work for a big provider like ourselves. And at the top end, you've got the likes of ourselves. So we employ over 250 people in our security business in the UK, comfortably more. IBM, who are bigger than us, they're probably up to the 400 or 500 in the UK. So depending on, there's a real mix of organizations is a point I'm trying to make here. Bottom left, in terms of revenue, you will see that the majority of the revenue for cybersecurity comes from that 10% of the bigger players in the market. Okay. No great surprises there. And the bottom right, percentage of dedicated versus diversified. So what you find in the bigger organizations like ourselves is absolutely we sell security services as a security service to a customer. But most of the security we sell is part of another proposition. So when we sell end user services, when we sell cloud, when we sell other infrastructure and network type services, hybrid IT services, security is a part of that. So what this tells you is most of the revenue that the likes of the service integrators make from security comes through securing other services. Whereas at the smaller end of the kind of size of organization, they can focus entirely on security. Right, so if you work for a small pen testing company, 100% of your effort is going to be in security. If you work for a big service integrator and you come into our world, you might be on a project that gets you involved in a customer working on a multi-cloud opportunity, working on a network type deal, working on a hybrid opportunity, application type, or a project, or an operational technology security type role. So that's the balance between big organizations who tend to do a broader spectrum of services they need to secure, as well as securing security services, versus the small organizations. Okay, moving on to the types of typical roles, and I've broken this into 3 areas. So the one on the left here, so the one you can see that says sales, solution, delivery and operations. So that's a typical life cycle within a service integrator organization, and actually within any security company that sells services. So talking about the types of role, we just talk through the life cycle is probably the easiest way. So there are there's an absolute necessity to have sales and business development folk. So they're going to go out and drum up the business, take the proposition to our customers, understand what the customer needs are, and ideally bring them solutions and options that will actually address the business challenges that those customers face. To help them actually solution or cost up and kind of define a solution that will meet the customer's needs, we need security pre-sales architects, and also potentially at that stage you might need consultancy as well to kind of help shape the kind of deal we're going to offer to a client. And it depends on the type of deal. So some Some of the work we do as a service integrator can be 100% consultancy. Some of it can be 100% managed security services. Some of it can be a blend of both. So if you're going to sell and solution for a customer, you need to have those types of people at the front end of your selling cycle. As you move into delivery, so this is the point the customer wants to buy. At this point, so I should have said, you're going to have a number of other stakeholders like commercial people, financial people, assurance folk who are going to make sure that you're doing business in the right way. But as you move into delivery, you're now actually delivering services to the clients. This is where you need your security designers, your security architects, you need your service designs folks, you need project and program managers. So you can be a security project and program manager. And at this point, you may need pen testing services as you transition that service into the customer's environment. So this is about delivering, standing up the service that the customer is going to benefit from. Okay, so you've sold something, you've made sure that that meets the customer's requirements and it's exactly what they're after. You've now delivered the service, i.e. you're at a point to hand the service over to operations. So once you're into operations, this is a point where your security operations centers start to come into the frame. Two key elements for security, as you very well know. One is the management of that security infrastructure, making sure it's configured, it's compliant, it's got the rules applied, it's updated, all of the good management aspects. And the second element is about the monitoring of the output. So what we find is customers can focus on the management of infrastructure and not monitor, or sometimes they just look at what's coming out of it, but actually if the rules aren't set up, you're probably not getting value. So there is a fundamental element within security management to make sure that you're both managing and monitoring your security controls. So when you're into operations, you need a security engineer. So they're the guys and girls that manage the security platforms that are actually delivering tools. So if you deploy a security information and event management platform out there and you're pulling in information, they're the guys that make sure that all of the use cases are defined, all of the events and event sources are putting information into that SIEM, and you're actually making sure that you've set up your SIEM to alert on the use cases you've agreed with customers. That's just one example. Same for an identity and access management platform or a privileged access management platform. It's got to be configured to meet the customer's needs based on the design and the architecture that has been documented in delivery. In terms of the monitoring of the security tools, that's when your security operations center security analysts come to the fore. So those are the guys and girls that are there 24/7 monitoring the security output, and should there be an incident of significant size and scale, then we can go into incident response and incident management. So that's a different type of individual that we have within our organization. So we have the SOC analysts, levels 1, 2, and 3, and we have senior analysts that support. If you're into incident response or breach response, then you need to call on a slightly different type of character within the organization. So we have incident responders and incident managers that kind of pick up at that point, depending on the severity and scale of that. So that's very much on a reactive basis. So on a proactive basis, we have threat intelligence analysts and threat analysts. So threat intelligence, no different to any other intelligence, right? So you can consume threat intelligence. The purpose that the threat intelligence analysts do in our organization and for our customers is go, so what? So you can get all the intelligence in the world, but actually if it's not relevant to the sector and it's not relevant to the customer and it's not relevant to potentially particular individuals and or websites for an organization, it's not relevant. So their job is to collate all of that intelligence, give really actionable intelligence. So if you've got intelligence feedback that says you're likely to be hit with a phishing campaign or an individual's credentials are leaked, all of this kind of intelligence, their role is to make sure that they're actually doing something proactive with it to better defend the organization. We've also got information security managers and auditors. So their role is to make sure that the service that we deliver is compliant with the requirements set in the contract, also by law, also by the customer's policies as well. So the information security manager and auditor, their role is to make sure that is done. We also have continuity and resilience folk. So they're all about making sure that the platforms and the exercises are in place to be able to test and assure the resilience of the services we deliver for our customers. We do have a number of accounts, chief information security officers. Their role is primarily to make sure that, much like the ISM, things are delivered, but they've got a more strategic role. So account CISOs tend to sit alongside the customer and strategically work with the customer to help them improve the customer's security posture. And the final element is account management in the round. So some of our security-led opportunities, they have a security person who is the account manager. So they are effectively managing that account, managing that delivery for the customer overall. So that's on the left-hand side. I've quickly taken you through the life cycle of how we sell, how we solution, how we deliver into a customer environment, and how we provide an ongoing 24/7 service and respond to incidents as and when they're needed, and continually improve the service for the customer. So in there are a number of different types of roles. So I think there was one fallacy that I picked up very early in the cyber industry. Not everybody has to be a very, very deep technical person. The industry has many different roles for many different types of individuals with many different skill sets, right? What I will say is, if you have a really good grounding of security and the technologies, it is going to be an advantage, right? Absolutely going to be an advantage to you, but it is not the be and end all. Do not think because you're not a super techie or you can't code in Ansible or Perl or Python that you can't make a decent living in the cybersecurity industry. All right. So that's kind of the service integrator world. If I move it to the top right element now. So these are the typical types of roles you find in an end user, or sorry, a company. So the benefit of the role that I fulfill is I get kind of a number of lenses on the world, but one of them is I get to talk to customers a lot. So you very quickly start to understand how their organizations function, what their challenges are, and the types of role that they're always looking for. So typically we deal with a customer CISO or an equivalent. So all sorts of funny titles out there in the industry, VP of information security, head of information security, but typically somebody is at the top of the ladder for security, and that's the chief information security officer. So around he or her, what they need is a number of functions. So governance, risk and compliance, absolutely essential. Typically, most organizations have got some sort of security operations function. It can be very small, but they need somebody or some function to be able to interface, to either monitor their own security tools or to interface with the provider of services. So when we provide managed security services to an organization, typically you'll have somebody who's responsible for interfacing with us, and that can be their security operations focal point. And if incidents end up being escalated, then they need somebody to be able to manage those incidents. Identity and access management is becoming, identity and access management is probably one of the fastest growing areas in security. So particularly as we adopt more cloud and federate our services and data. So identity is always a balance of ease of access versus security. So making sure that you can only access what you're allowed to is fundamental for organizations. Organizations continually running security improvement programs, that's a given. Security doesn't stand still, nor does the infrastructure, nor does the data they're storing. So all of that needs a continuous evolution of programs. So you'll find roles for security program managers out there and project managers. Another area of growth, security awareness and culture training. So probably over the last 2 years, we've seen a rapid increase in the number of security awareness roles in companies, because part of everybody's role in any organization is security, right? Not, security in an organization is everybody's responsibility, not just the CISOs, but what that role does, that ensures that there's an education and awareness program to raise that. Most organizations have got to operate under a security architecture of some sort. Data protection and privacy, they're all really relevant for end user customers as well. One area of focus, again, probably relatively recent, is third party or vendor management. So what you tend to find is an organization has a kind of bubble that it works in. However, all organizations have other providers and vendors that provide to them, or they partner with, or they serve. Managing that vendor risk and that vendor management perspective is really important. You know, probably one of the most famous incidents ever was the Target incident. Actually, that came through a third party, right? So managing your third parties and the way you interconnect with third parties is hugely important for customers. Business continuity and resilience, because if you do have a business impact event, you do not want a visit from Captain Hindsight at that point. You want to have prepared for it, practiced it, so it's not hit you for the first time. If organizations have security management tools themselves, either managing their own infrastructure, then they need people to manage that. Also, a lot of organizations are quite, I use the term siloed advisory. They have a number of lines of business, right? Typically, lines of business have their own security needs. So what you have is, it's not the CISO, it's a CISO. It's or the typical line of business securities. Their responsibility is to understand security needs of the line of business. So whereas historically everything went through the CIO, Chief Information Officer for IT needs, now actually a lot of that's devolved down into the organization. So if marketing or HR want to go out and buy a SaaS platform to do marketing or HR, there's not a lot stopping them, to be honest, because they can just subscribe to something new. It's not a great way of doing business, but what the line of business lead does is provide some assurance of what each of the lines of business. So they've got an understanding of how data is being managed in that particular line of business. Sorry. Probably again, big areas of growth, multi-cloud and applications. More and more companies are embracing agile, they're embracing DevOps type cultures and DevSecOps. So all of that and the security champions that need to be embedded within an organization to help developers think about security, again, their roles we're seeing more and more. Much as we have threat intelligence and we consume threat intelligence, our end user customers have threat intelligence folk that consume the output either that we provide them or they get themselves to be able to take the intelligence and proactively address and improve their security posture. And the one that people often forget in organizations, security policy and standards. So if you don't have a policy, you're kind of struggling from day one. So those are the typical roles that we tend to see in end user organizations. Really depends on the size and scale and maturity and investment that organizations get in terms of how many of those roles are fulfilled. But those are the typical roles that you see in organizations. On the bottom right is a view of consultancy and the types of consulting roles that we see. It will not surprise you that the roles here largely align to the roles in the company environment, right? So companies are the primary employers of consultants. So what you find in the market is an alignment of what companies need to the way consultancy houses describe the consultants that they provide. So there are many roles like interim CISOs that are effectively filling roles that organizations can't, because primarily consultancy brings expertise, right, that the organization may not have. So they might not need a full-time pen tester as an example. So what they'll do is they'll hire when they need. They might not have a full-time CISO, or they might be going through a gap between CISOs. So they need to be able to access the expertise to fill those gaps. Projects like identity and access management are complex business change projects. They're not technology projects, they're complex business change projects. So an organization trying to do that on their own is going to struggle. So what they'll do is they'll hire in specialists to fix that challenge for them. Right. So I make no secret, the consultancy roles tend to align to the way organizations set up, because they're going to want those skills, right? So typically expertise, typically sometimes consultants are brought in to deliver projects that the company simply can, and sometimes consultants are brought in to bring in bad news, right? So if it's clear that if you're the CISO of an organization or you're in charge and you recognize the security isn't great, sometimes you can bring an expertise to bring bad news, and the consultancy company will just reiterate what you may or may not have been telling your board for some time. So there are a number of reasons why consultants are used, but the alignment is relatively to the way companies, the company's target operator model, is structured. There are some exceptions in there. So we're seeing growth in operational technology security needs. So certainly that's probably been one of our biggest growth areas. And the other piece we're seeing a bit more demand around is that security strategy and also mergers and acquisitions conversation. So there are specialist merger and acquisitions companies out there that will advise companies on security merger and acquisitions. So that was kind of the types of roles. So service providers, we follow a life cycle from sales through to delivery through to operation and growth. Target operating models for organizations vary. So you've probably heard the story that every CISO reports to a different person in various organizations. It could be the finance officer, the risk officer, the CIO, the CDO, whoever. It's all a bit of a mix, but these are the typical types of roles that you find. And consulting organizations, again, tend to align with what their customers need. Hence, the description of what they do is largely aligned to what the people that pay for them are looking for. Right. Final topic, I think, was around certifications. Right. OK. So there are a number of industry certifications that we all love. I'll switch this off a second, actually. Yes, there's a number of industry certifications that we all love. So some of them are more generic. So the likes of the CompTIA, the CISP, the CISMs and the like, they're kind of broad and wide, and that's absolutely fine. So they give you a really good foundation. As you pick and choose your career path, you then get probably other options in terms of the types of certification you may or may not wish to choose to do. So all of those technology partners I showed you earlier, they have specific certifications. Some of the better well-known ones are the likes of the Cisco certifications, but all of the vendors along with Checkpoints, the Logarithms, the IBMs, and all of those technology providers have specific certifications, right? So they're valuable if you want to work in those types of environment. Really, really valuable. Understand you guys doing pen testing courses. So again, if you want to go into that line of business, as you get, and some of it's not just about certification, it's about you need to show demonstrated experience as well. So you can get into the realms of your crests and your other types of training in that world. If you want to go into the security operations center side of the house, there are some fairly standard certifications, the likes of the SANS, GIAC qualification, that's highly regarded. So a lot of the certifications depend on which part of the industry you wish to go and progress. So, for example, at the moment, we're putting a number of guys through specific operational technology security certification because we haven't got those people today. We need them. So the company's investing in a number of people in what is a relatively expensive course to get them upskilled. Right, so a lot of this, so there's generic security qualifications which are valuable, but a lot of it depends on which particular area of the industry you wish to go after. If you want to be a security project or program manager, then you go off and do those project and program management courses and courses like Agile. If I were to give any advice, I'd follow the growth. Right, so I wouldn't get too hung up around specific product vendor certifications at this stage. Certainly, and you can get all the stats from the market. Certainly, areas of growth, cloud security, application security. We can't get enough AWS and Azure certified experts. So that's absolutely an area of focus. As organizations digitally transform, you will see an uptake in operational technology security as well. And then really it's about trying to find, as I say, faster growing areas within security. But as I maintain, do not be scared of coming into the cyber industry just because you're not a super techie, right? There are so many opportunities in this side of the house, and it really does depend on how people hire. So there's a classic line about, do you hire an attitude or expertise, right? And it's a bit too black and white. It's a mix. So what you'll find most employers are hiring on primarily is your attitude, your leadership skills, your commitment, your drive and your energy and your will to learn. So very few employers, despite the fact they say CISP is desirable in the job app, would preclude a good candidate because they haven't got CISP. Right, so what most organisations are looking for is somebody that will grow within their organisation. But maybe that's a narrow view from the sort of guys and girls that I know, but most of the employers and most of my colleagues, they're looking for attitude over specific certification 9 times out of 10. Okay, that was it, Andrew. I'll open it up if there are any questions.
Thank you, sir. I'm glad that we are being consistent on our advice there, I think, and that the to be cautious at least, and for people who are we're all made in the military way to go after qualifications on the assumption that that is what gets promoted in the military, therefore it's what gets you jobs afterwards. And I think it's good to hear it's not just me banging that drum. I think the only comment I would make in addition to that, and guys, do pop any questions you've got into the chat. The only thing additional comment I would make is that a lot of employers are willing and indeed expect to pay people for training, John, or to pay for training. John was just talking there about some of the qualifications that Fujitsu encourage people to do. Many others will do the same, and they'll do that either during or more likely immediately after they're going through a hiring process. And increasingly we're seeing employers who are frustrated by the fact that they can't get people with what they need to do the jobs that they're needing filled today, that they're investing in the sort of program that you're in to have more control over the content. So be cautious about these qualifications, especially if you're going to pay for them, because many of these things are now available for free. Anyone got any questions? Sorry, John.
Certainly not. Well, that give you a flavour of the type of certifications and qualifications that we've got on the go at the moment. So one of my teams currently doing an MSc in Queen's University Belfast that we're funding. One of the guys is doing, did an MBA 18 months ago. We've got people doing the OT security qualifications. We've got lots of people doing CISPs and CISMs, and that's both sort of in region and in the global delivery centres. So it's probably often been said to you on the course, and you've read it, there is a cyber skill shortage, right? And that skill shortage is in 2 elements. One in terms of sort of security expertise, but 2 in terms of people and the quality of people wanting to join our industry. I'm not aware of any employer, and I get to talk to lots of colleagues and friends who work for other competitors and people we work with, right? So if you get good security talent and they're hungry to learn and desperate to be better, we'll invest.
Yeah.
Right, we invest in people because you do not want your talent leaving. It's as blunt as that. Because the biggest difference when you leave the service is you can walk with your feet if you're not happy with your job, right? And candidly, I'm being very candid now, we don't particularly want that for our best talent. So if it's investment in the type of job you're going to do, the type of role you're going to fulfill, or the type of training, then that's generally a very open conversation.
One more while I just wait if anyone's got any other questions. I'm thinking of some of the guys actually who are on this call who are breaking into cyber for the first time. So they've got obviously their military security training and experience. Do you have any advice for them in terms of how to complete their break-in battle into a sector that, other than general military security, they perhaps don't have the sort of experience that is written on a job description, for example?
Yeah, so I think I like the way this course is set up to try and get people placements and experience. So any experience you can get is a good thing, right? And I think the one thing, and I didn't get it until I left, there are a number of qualities that we leave with, and this is probably often said, that you leave with and you have indoctrinated into you. And we all had it when we're in the service. Some fundamental things like turning up, doing a really, really good job, kind of feeling as though you've earned your money and continually trying to grow and be better. Make sure you talk to employers about your development through your career, because I don't think I've dread to think how many people I've hired over the last 14, coming up 14 years since I've left. I've never had a perfect fit for a job yet. Right, never. It just doesn't happen. So if I'm looking for a consultant, I get a consultant who's probably 80% fit. Most employers, if they get 60% plus, and a lot of that's down to your aptitude and skills, and you are showing a real hunger and ability to assimilate information, learn, have been put in similar situations, you know, so when you've been working through your career, you've had times where you've had difficult conversations or challenging projects or deployed for operations. It's all relevant expertise where you've been put under stress, and you've actually overcome it. You haven't given up, you haven't had a meltdown, you've overcome that. And how you overcome it and how you talk about demonstrating how you've overcome those challenges is really important to employers, because ultimately we're trusting our teams to be our representatives to our customers. If you've got that already, then that's really, really powerful, and you just build the technical skills and or the skills in a particular line of business, whether you go and be a security project manager, whether you go and be a pen tester, whether you go and be an information security manager, whatever you do, if you've got those core skills to build on, it's really powerful for employers. That'd be my advice. You know, use your experience and the environments you've been in, try and turn the language around to how that's relevant to that employer and go from there.
It's a great point, John. We tend, I suppose, again, as military people, look at a job description, and then if there are things written on there that we can't meet or do or have the experience, then we'll discard that and go on. So that sort of knowing in the back of your brain that actually the hiring manager's only expecting it or sees 60% fit as a good result is quite a good place to start. So that gives you 40% of a job description that you know that you might not actually have to fill on the day. And as you would expect, we spend an awful lot of our time talking to our employers about, do you really need that on a job description? And pretty much every job description I see in the IT sector talks about a requirement for a degree. And actually, very few employers, when we challenge that and say, will you accept military experience in lieu of that, they'll go, yeah, of course we will. Okay, well, why write it on the bloody job description in the first place? Anyway, that's a really good point. We shouldn't regard job descriptions as or requiring it. We don't have to do everything on that job description in order to at least have a go at a job. We had one client who produced an 11-page job description, which was enough to put anyone off. So that was a bit of an exercise to get that down to a manageable chunk. Has anyone got any other questions? So Eamon's thanking you for a very clear overview of the opportunities in the market. So he's a happy customer. Anyone else got any more before we draw to a close? I'll echo that, John. Actually, I think that was really helpful. If you'd be kind enough to fling the PowerPoint to me afterwards, I'll share that with the troops. Anyone got any last questions for John? Okay, I think we will, on behalf of the 9 guys who turned up, John, I thank you very much indeed for your time. I know this will be watched by others, and I'll forward any feedback and any further questions from those guys as they look at it over the next few days. But really appreciate your engagement with this. Really appreciate your advice, and it comes so well from somebody who has transitioned themselves and gone through the journey that you've gone through, both in the forces and subsequently. So thank you all very much indeed. And to everyone else, I hope you are keeping up okay with the Abertay University content. I think we're now over the access problems into the Learning Space portal. But if you've got any problems with that, do get in touch with me, or more likely Hattie, who's better able to answer technical questions, or of course the Abate team. So I wish you happy studies, and thank you all very much for joining this afternoon. John, thanks again.
Okay.
Cheerio.
Delighted. Cheers all.
Bye.